got here is a piece of that scrap walnut, and I wanted to test to see what color I want to get it. This right here is just the natural wood with the finish applied to it. Pretty good. This is Laurel Mountain Antique Wood Stain Honey Maple, and I thinned it down about 50-50 with lacquer thinner. This is straight out of the bottle. This is the American Walnut. Now I sped dry these up because normally it takes about 4 hours for the stain to dry, but I put a heat gun on it. Wanted to see what it would look like quickly. Then I'm going to take a little bit of my finish here. This is an old-time recipe of finish that I've come up with, that if you guys want some, you can go online to my website and get some of yourself. It's a linseed oil base with natural dryers added to it. Works great. Takes about 3, at most 4 coats. What I'll do is I'll just rub that in, and can't see a lot of difference. I can see where the 50-50 is. You can see a little bit there of the full strength, and of course you can see where the American Walnut is. And I'm thinking that might be a little dark, but it's not bad. The honey maple didn't make a lot of difference. I got a little bit of a yellow tone going on, and that's not bad, but not exactly what I was going for either. So I may just go ahead and stain it with the American Walnut straight out of the bottle and see how that looks. I like the little bit darker color because naturally the wood's going to darken with age and handling oils, and so this just kind of speeds up the process a little bit of that aging. Now I'm not going to actually do any real aging to this gun. There's so many different thoughts on that. A lot of people like their gun finished and antiqued with the wood and the metal already got a patina on it, and that's a school that came out, I guess about 25 years ago with Herschel House and his buddies. And in a way that's kind of cool, aging your gun a little bit, as long as you don't go overboard. If I age a gun like that, artificial age it, I'll give it about maybe like a 20 years worth of use on the gun. If you do any more than that, basically all you're doing is hiding flaws. You got pits in the brass castings. It's a good way to hide those. You patina it so they don't look like they're glaring you right in the face. You got dents and dings or a bad piece of wood, you patina it so it looks natural, it looks like use. But that's just kind of a lazy man's way of finishing something, I think. So when I was in the gun shop at Williamsburg, what we did was basically finish guns as new and let them age over time. Because if you drag the gun through the woods and shoot it a lot, it's going to age naturally, and it's going to get those natural dents and dings. The brass will patina nicely. The metal parts, generally I finish them with a fire blue finish, and that's going to wear in time through handling, through use too. But you know, I go either way. It depends on what the customer wants. I can give it that 20-year patina, or I can finish it as new. This gun, I'll probably give it a very light patina on the brass just to darken it down a little bit, but I'll leave the wood as new. Alright, so again, up to you. Alright, so I've got a piece of sheep's wool here that I use for staining purposes. Of course, this one's pretty well used, but just going to use the Laurel Mountain right out of the bottle. Some people will do inside the patch box, some don't. I generally do, but I'll get in there with a Q-tip or something to get in the corners and crevices. That'd be the last thing I do. But just put it on. Making sure you get all the spots that are going to be seen. And you can do the barrel channel too. It's not going to hurt it any, but just make sure you put a finish inside the barrel channel if you do stain in there too. Make sure you get all the little spots. And to get down inside the ramrod channel, again, a Q-tip or something works good, but you can also fold this over. And I'm not going to worry about getting my handprints on here because I'm going to actually wipe a lot of this excess off in just a minute. If you let it dry full strength, you're going to get a deeper color. But I've learned that one coat generally is about as dark a color as you're going to get on this stuff. It really doesn't build up. If you want it darker than this, some people like almost black walnut, then Laurel Mountain makes this stuff called ebony toner that works real good. Basically just a black, and it goes on quick. Same as you do here, just put a coat over top of this once the first coat dries. Now what I'll do is get the inside of this patch box, and I'll use a Q-tip for that. Get in the corners, and along the inside it's going to be exposed when the box is open. Good. Wipe off the excess again. Now let this dry about 4 hours before I'm going to actually steel wool it down with some very fine steel wool. Check for any other spots I need sanding, because the nice thing about this stain is that, unlike using the nitric acid, you can go back over a spot of this after you've sanded it and it'll blend right back in again. It'll dry a little light. As you can see here, it's already starting to dry. But when you put a finish on, it's going to darken down about 3 or 4 shades. So it'll look pretty good. Alright, so we'll come back in about 4 hours and see what it looks like. Alright, after putting the coat on there, I started looking at the finish real close, and I could see a number of spots where I could still see sanding marks left from the power sander. So I've been going back, hand sanding it with 220 grit and making sure all the lines are still crisp and smooth, and making sure I got rid of any of the jitter marks left in there from the machine. The mouse sander helps a lot, but it still will leave marks if you're not careful. So going back over the whole thing, hand sanding it all, and get it nice and smooth. The idea is like with any paint or finish work, furniture, cars, guns, you name it. It's all in how smooth you can get it to look, because you don't want to use that aging process to make it look old and still see all those marks in there from a machine sander. And if you're going to finish it as new, they'll look even worse. So let me finish sanding this up, and I'll let you guys watch. We'll probably put it in fast motion so that you won't have to spend all day sitting there watching. But I got the right side pretty well done. I'm going to do the left side now, and it's just a matter of just using a piece of sandpaper and going at it carefully, looking at it closely under a good light, and seeing where any sand marks are. Alright, here we go. You want to be careful not to sand too hard while the brass is out of mortises, butt plate. You don't want to round off that edge and cause a gap there while you're working. You want that butt plate to still fit it nice and tight. And I'll check the fit again on the butt plate and other parts to make sure they're not too proud of the wood. If they are, I'll take the edges of the metal down to match up nicely. I should probably be wearing my respirator at this point since there is a lot of dust in the air, but I like to live dangerously. As long as I blow the dust off and not suck it in, I think I'll be alright. Again, you want to be careful around sharp edges. I find that using my thumb as a round piece works better than sanding blocks. Always go with the grain. As you go along, you can move your light around, get it up nice and close, and inspect your areas you just worked. And if you get the light at sort of a glancing angle, it'll help more to see exactly what you're doing. You can see all the little bumps and ridges better. And about the only time I use some sort of a sanding block or pad is when I want to make sure something is nice and flat. And that's when I'll use back of a file, nice and flat. Want to keep that flat surface nice and flat. It helps keep the edges nice and clean. But make sure your paper is not hanging over the edge like this while you're sanding, or you're going to round things off. And if you need to, you can also turn the half round file around, use it to get in there and clean up corners if you want. I still like to use my fingers, but around the lock mortise you want to get nice crisp lines. When I inlet things like side plates, trigger guards, patch boxes, whatever, things that mount in flush like this rear of the trigger guard, I always inlet a little bit deeper than what I want the final depth to be, because I take into account the fact that I'm going to be sanding some of that height down, so that when I'm finished and the parts go back in, everything will be just the right height that I want it to be. Another thing you can do, and this works especially true with the maple, is after you sand it good and you think you got it looking really nice, is wet the whole stock down with water and let it air dry, and sand it again, and do that 2 or 3 times to raise the grain up so you get a nice, really smooth finish, and you'll see a lot cleaner finish when the final coat's applied. If you're going to use especially something like nitric acid stain, which has water added to it, it's going to raise the grain, so if you pre-do that several times first, it'll make your stock look a whole lot smoother when you're done. Now I'll be using an oil-based stain on this, that Laurel Mountain, so it's not quite as necessary to do that, raising the grain, because the oil won't cause the grain to raise up by itself. This gun does not get a nose cap because it's supposed to be like a Fowler. And I've seen a lot of guns that people have made, Fowlers, trade guns, that the one thing I hate is when they just square off the end of the stock and they don't round over here, and you also want to round over from the top line of the barrel channel too. It just makes it look a lot cleaner, a lot smoother, sort of ends it off nicely. An abrupt stop just, in my opinion, doesn't look good. And this is more typical of what you'd see on an old gun. Putting a nose band on something like this would not be a bad idea either if you wanted to. I've seen them done to trade guns, but also a lot to Fowlers and a few rifles. They were just a quick, easy way to keep the wood from splitting on the end and make it look a little nicer. And I've got a previous video on how to put those nose bands on. So you can check back and see how that was done. Alright, we got this pretty well done. Touch up a few spots here and there that I missed. But I think we're ready for another coat of stain. Now let it dry again. As you can see, it's getting pretty smooth now. Let's see if I can get the light on it here so you can see it better. Let me get that top area there that I missed. Get along these channels here. You want this to blend in nicely. A lot of these you'll see today, people are doing this sort of cutout, which is fine. I've seen that on old guns. You'll also see where they actually flute this, so you get sort of a trough effect in there that matches up with the breech of the barrel. Either way is fine. The trough effect is probably more English, but there's one thing about that you got to be careful when you get up next to the tang here. If you got a sharp edge, when you go to pull that barrel out, you can very easily break out that edge right there. So whenever possible, I try not to do that flute unless I'm copying a style of gun that was more typical on. Alright, I think we pretty well got it. Looking pretty good now. So I'll go ahead and put that last coat of stain on and let it dry, and then we'll get ready to put the finish on. See you in a little bit.